And so the technology, all these things are such a big part of our daily lives. And there's some benefits to that, but there are also some drawbacks to that. And I think we've seen with some of these big tech companies how they've used their power to advance their agenda, how they've used their power to commandeer personal information of individual Americans. And so we want to make sure that we're providing protection for Floridians to speak their mind on these platforms, making sure that their data isn't monetized without their consent, making sure that government is not colluding with these companies to try to stifle speech like we've seen in recent history. So we're tackling all those. Now, we did the big tech censorship bill in 2021. I think we may have signed that in here, or we did an event around it here. But basically, our 2021 law said things like Facebook, these are private companies, that's true, but they put themselves out as being open platforms. And they say, we're not publishers. You can use our platform and you can say, you know, what you want, basically. And they get liability protection from the federal government. You can't sue them if somebody goes on their platform and defames you because they say they're not making publishing decisions. But what we've seen over the years is they take that liability protection, they say they're not publishers, and then they put the thumb on the scale in favor of one perspective. And if you're offering conservative dissent, you could get stifled, you could get taken down. If you dissented from the official COVID orthodoxy, they would take you down, they would try to stifle you. And so that is taking, I think, liability protection and abusing it. So what our bill just said is, look, if you're an open platform, if that's how you're advertising, you can have rules in terms of what you want or not want, but you got to apply those evenly. And if you're discriminating against people with viewpoints you don't like, then they have an ability to seek redress. And so we put that in. We gave the Attorney General the ability to bring actions against tech companies for unfair and deceptive trade practices. And we also prohibited big tech platforms from deplatforming political candidates. Now, they immediately sued on that, and we knew it was going to be a huge legal issue. So this case, the law is now pending at the U.S. Supreme Court. And I think that they're going to end up taking it probably for next year. But the question is just going to be, these big tech companies, are they able to just get liability protection and then just do whatever they want? Or if they're acting as publishers, they lose the liability protection. And if that's the case, look, as a publisher, any one of you can set up a website and you could host only the views you want. No one's disputing that. What I think we're disputing is when they say it's an open platform, when they're getting this liability protection, you then sign up, they take your data and they make money off of it, and then they censor you if you say something they don't like. That wasn't the deal. And so we want to be able to hold accountable on that. So stay tuned on the tech censorship. But then, even since we passed the bill, the things that came out are even much worse than what we even thought then. We, of course, knew during COVID that they were censoring people who were speaking out against lockdowns, speaking out against mask mandates, speaking out against school closures. But what I think we learned in the intervening time is that this was not just tech doing it on their own. They were actually working with people like Fauci and working with people in the government. And so they were basically doing the government's bidding in terms of stifling dissent. You cannot, as a government, subcontract out restrictions of speech to a private company and say that that's somehow okay. It's not okay. And so that basically is a violation of the First Amendment when they're acting as an arm of the state. And we saw that with COVID. We also saw it with the suppression of the Hunter Biden story in the 2020 election. That was FBI and DHS working with these companies. And basically, they were the ones spewing misinformation, and they were censoring truthful information. So the fusion of government and tech for the purpose of censoring things that dissent from the official narrative, that's a huge, huge threat to freedom of speech in this country. And so Florida's leaned in on that. This is going to be resolved by the Supreme Court on that particular censorship front. But then what we're doing here today, I think, is covering a lot more ground that we need to be able to protect the folks in our state. So I'm going to sign Senate Bill 262 today, and this does create the Digital Bill of Rights. It basically establishes a number of protections for Floridians with respect to the digital sphere. One, the right to control your personal data, including the right to confirm access and delete your personal data from a social platform. You should be in control of this and ultimately have the final say over it. Also has the right to know that your personal data will not be used against you when purchasing a home, obtaining health insurance, or being hired. That's important for privacy. You also have a right to know how internet search engines manipulate search results. You know, if you go back and did a Google search 20 years ago and then did the same thing today, much different result. You know, big changes in algorithms, and I think these algorithms oftentimes have an agenda. And this will start tying into huge issues about things like artificial intelligence. You know, the artificial intelligence is basically mining data and doing things, but if that data is flawed, or if they're trying to produce an agenda with the underlying data, the outputs are going to be flawed as well. Big problem for society if that happens. That's not addressed in this bill because this is something that would need to be addressed federally, but there's huge perils with some of the things that are going on in that realm as well. You also have the right to opt out of having your personal data sold. So when they do these platforms, you're signing up, they don't charge you for it, but they take your data and they sell it to all these vendors usually, and they make a lot of money selling your data. Well, you should have the right to say, no, I don't want you selling my data. You now will with this book, with this bill. And then finally, this provides the right to protect children from personal data collection. Do you really want companies mining your child's data? Now you're going to have protection against it. One of the things this does that I think is important is it includes biometric data and geolocation information to the adding that to the definition of personal data. Because if you think about it, they can track, you have a phone, they can track where you're going on your phone. So if you go from here and you go 2 miles down the street to like a McDonald's, they will have that data. And that's really about personal data for you. So we're counting that as personal in terms of things that you have a right to privacy to, because we don't want tech companies being able to willy-nilly track your day-to-day movements. It's just not right. What we're going to do with the search engines is require Google and other large search engines operating in Florida to disclose whether they prioritize search results based on political or ideological views or based on monetary considerations. So much of it is you type in these searches, what they generate has a huge influence on how people see the world. So what's the agenda that's leading into that? Another important provision on this bill, in Florida, this bill will ban all state and local government officials from coordinating with big tech to police or to censor protected speech. We're not going to be in a situation where you have like the FBI colluding with Facebook and then they're censoring stories that are truthful because it doesn't fit the agenda. So our government agents, and we have not done that in Florida, and I don't think any local officials have been doing that to my knowledge, but the reality is now there's protections against that. It is inappropriate for government agents to be working with platforms to try to infringe on people's speech rights, and so now that'll be the law in Florida. And then yes, of course, with the children, this is going to ensure that online platforms that are providing services, games, or products targeted to children will not collect, sell, or share the personal data of a child. It's very difficult with kids because like our kids, 6, 5, and 3, they'll grab our phones and they'll just start typing stuff in. And they know how to do this stuff very quickly. It's something that they learn. And so, are they going to be like downloading this or that? And so it's, I think a lot of parents are concerned about how some of this stuff is operating. So all in all, this is a very robust series of protections for Floridians. I think it's going to make a big difference, and I think I'm really proud that the legislature was able to get this done. We had been working on this really for the last year or two, and we just had too many hurdles, I think, with the legislature at that time on kind of getting it right. Because on the one hand, we want to protect your rights to data and privacy. On the other hand, we don't want necessarily this to generate, frivolous lawsuits or things like that. So you needed to find the happy medium. And I think we were able to do it today. So this empowers Floridians. You are not just going to be at the mercy of Big Brother kind of looking over everything you do and collecting all the information about you without your consent. And so I hope people will avail themselves of these protections, and I think it'll make a positive difference for freedom in the state of Florida. All right, so we're going to come up here and we'll make it official with signing into law. All right. Who else coming up? Got everybody staged? Okay. Today's the 6th. All right, who wants a pen? Sean. Anyone else? Okay. All right, now I got one for any other little kids? Huh? Okay, there we go. All right, so here it is.